What's up everyone, Criddle here, and in this video we're going to go over the fighter class in Monsters and Memories. We're going to cover how I would build the character and stat priority, the fighter's role in a group, how well the fighter can solo, and finally take a look at some of the skills and abilities. The fighter is the premier defensive class in Monsters and Memories and your go-to tank if you want to be the best at taking physical damage. While the fighter doesn't have much in the way of spells or abilities, it makes up for it in the ability to wear heavy plate and boast high HP. The fighter can currently be any race, and I suspect every race available in the future as they are released. Different from other classes, race can in fact matter for tanking classes, and I will go over those under major combat traits. As for stats, we see strength and stamina are higher than the others, indicating these are useful to the class, and I would agree and max those out. Strength will increase the damage dealt by the fighter, and stamina will increase its health pool and thus its survivability, which is its main job. This leaves 3 points to work with and 2 stats worth putting them into. The first is Dex, which increases the chance to hit enemies in melee combat, especially those higher level than you, and Agility, which increases the chance the defensive skill triggers like dodge, block, or parry. Both of these are worth having as you will need to hit the enemy to gain threat and keep them targeting you, but you also want to avoid as much damage as possible, easing the burden on your healer. Personally, I would take Dexterity, but neither of these choices are bad. For major combat traits, you have several choices, some of which are tied directly to race. Let's take a look at the ones not tied to race first, and those are Agile, Brawn, Dexterous, and Fortitude. All 4 of these are viable for various reasons. The active ability of Agile, which increases agility by 50%, could be a huge defensive boost for 15 seconds, allowing you to dodge, block, or parry more often. Dodge and parry specifically negate melee attack damage, which is huge when you're taking tough enemies, especially raid bosses. Brawn is nice for the added damage for the bonus strength, and the active ability could be great for gaining a bit more threat at the start of a fight, allowing DPS to begin attacking earlier without pulling threat from you. Dexterous will add dexterity, allowing you to hit more often, and the active ability again would be great at the beginning of a fight before your party or raid has a chance to debuff the enemy, making them easier to hit. If you aren't hitting the enemy, then you aren't gaining threat, in which case you aren't doing your job as a tank. Lastly is Fortitude, as the added health is always nice on a tank class. Do note that the active ability for this only increases your max HP and not your current HP, so you will need to be healed as soon as you use the ability. In a group or raid, this shouldn't be an issue, as you can use this on pull and be topped off before you actually engage. Next up would be race-specific traits, and those are Ogre Smash, Slippery, and Stone Form. A fourth option is Hardiness, assuming its race can be a fighter, but due to the recent update, it is not currently available, but it would give you 15% stun resist. Ogre Smash is a 2-second stun, which is great for any tank or really any class to have. My only issue here would be the recast timer, as all other active abilities have a 5-minute timer, at least prior to this recent update. Even though a 2-second stun is very powerful, I'm not sure a 5-minute recast would be worth it. Slippery, which is now a gnome-only trait, is another great option, especially if you're going to be a puller for the party, as tanks do often pull. Finally, Stone Form, which is a dwarf-specific trait, and I believe the best of all race-specific options, and maybe the best overall for fighters. Reducing physical damage by 10% and increasing armor class by 25% alone is enough to take this trait, but the ability to remove disease, electricity, and poison effects is an added bonus that can save your healer some mana. Lastly, I want to call out all of the resist traits, as any of these could be huge, but I believe they are too specific to take. Sure, there may be 1 or 2 raid mobs where having a specific resist could be extremely beneficial. I don't believe it will make or break your ability to tank. Looking at all of this, I believe Stone Form would be my first choice if I were to choose Dwarf. Otherwise, it would be a toss-up between Agility or Fortitude, although I'd lean more towards Agility at this time. Minor combat trait is a tough one for me, as none of them really stand out as a must-have, but there are 2 options. First is Deadeye, simply to help increase my archery skill faster, as I will not be using it often, but it would be nice to keep maxed out. The reason for this is I often shoot an arrow to pull mobs, and actually hitting the mob for even a small amount of damage can help threat at the start of a fight. The second is Shieldman, as once I hit level 10, I will switch to dual wield and rarely use my shield unless I must have the extra defense. This will help keep that skill maxed for when it is needed. Major non-combat trait is generally the same for every class, and I would choose Master Artisan if I plan to do trade skills, or Forage for the free food and water. Fast and slow metabolism, in my opinion, are not worth it, as food is fairly cheap and easy to obtain, and currently Endurance doesn't do much other than allow you to jump a few extra times. While Infravision and Ultravision can be nice for seeing in the dark, you can also use light sources or adjust your monitor to compensate. Iron Lung is another one that can easily be replaced with the Endure Breath spell. Sneak is also an option if I chose Havling, as a way of getting around a bit easier in a dungeon. And finally, we have the minor non-combat trait, which is up to you. Choose whichever trait you want based on the trade skill you want to level. If you want to level several, find the one that would be most difficult. I will say that if you plan to solo on the fighter, having Bind Wound is a must, and that is tied to the medicine trait. That said, Bind Wound is not extremely difficult to level, but this would make it easier to keep maxed out. As for skills, the fighter starts off at level 1 with all the basic skills like offense, defense, and slashing, as well as additional defensive skills most other classes don't get, like block and dodge. While you start off at level 1 with the ability to dodge, it can sometimes be difficult to start, so I recommend going to the class trainer when you have 1 copper and buying your first point in that. At level 10, you will unlock the parry and dual wield, which really opens up the fighter as a premier tank, giving it additional defensive skill and bonus offense with the ability to attack in extra time each round of combat. This is great for the threat generation as well as DPS. At level 15, you unlock double attack, further increasing your DPS and threat generation. I recommend returning to your class trainer at each of these levels and putting 1 point in each of the skills to get them started. Looking at fighter abilities, they don't have many to work with, but what they do have are mostly geared towards tanking. Starting at level 1, you get the kick ability, which interrupts spellcasters for 4 seconds, and taunt to keep the enemy focused on you. The charge ability at level 3 gets you in the fight faster, so you can position the enemy and start to build threat before your DPS begin to unload. At level 4, you unlock Defensive Stance, which is what helps the fighter stand out versus other tanks with its 10% damage reduction and bonus 5 defense, which makes you effectively 1 level higher when the enemy attacks you. At level 5, you can reduce the damage of nearby targets by 5%, which also acts as a small amount of AoE threat to keep enemies focused on you, and at level 7, a hard AoE taunt which really draws the aggro to you. One drawback to this skill, however, is the long cooldown, so be sure to use it wisely. At level 8, you gain a 6-second stun and an AoE fear, which can be used in a pinch, but I would be careful using this in the wrong time or you may get some unwanted adds. At level 9, you gain another defensive ability, allowing you to stand out among other tanks, reducing physical damage by 40% for 30 seconds. Level 10 gives you additional ways to generate damage and threat with Frenzy and Shield Bash. And finally, at level 11 and 12, more buffs that increase your and your party's maximum health. Overall, the fighter is set up to be the best physical damage tank in the game and has a lot of potential for single target DPS for a tank class. Without any form of healing, however, the fighter is almost exclusively a group tank and will struggle trying to solo, putting them as one of the worst, if not the worst solo class in the game. Anyway, that's all for this video. If you enjoyed the content or found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and follow for more. Also, be sure to tune in to my Twitch streams where we'll be playing and chatting about Monsters and Memories as well as many other games. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!